Hello and welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because we are diving headfirst into the architecture of English grammar to completely demystify complex clauses. If you've ever found yourself tangling up your sentences or kind of getting stuck when translating your thoughts from Ukrainian to English, well, you are in the exact right place. We're going to take a really close look at the structural blueprints of the English language.
Okay, let's dive into this and look at our roadmap. First, main versus subordinate clauses. Second, if and time clauses. Third, relative clauses and punctuation. And finally, clauses of reason. Don't worry if that sounds like a lot. We're going to build this knowledge logically, step by step.
All right, Section 1, main versus subordinate clauses, laying the foundation.
Understanding this foundation is literally the key to everything that follows. I mean, if you don't have a solid foundation, the whole house falls down, right? A sentence isn't always just one simple clause. And this brilliantly illustrates how main clauses can totally stand alone, while subordinate clauses, they need an anchor. A main clause brings a complete, finished idea to the table. It can be its own sentence, like she came into the room. But a subordinate clause has no real meaning without that main clause holding it up. Let's break it down to its absolute simplest form. A clause equals a subject plus a verb. Boom. That's it. Every single grammatical room we're building today starts with this one fundamental formula. Whether it's the main idea or just some supporting details, if you've got a subject performing a verb, you've got a clause. Deconstructing the syntax makes this super clear. Take, she came into the room. Perfect. Makes total sense. You pop a period at the end and you're good to go. But contrast that with when she came in. If I just walked up to you, said that, and then stopped talking, you'd be staring at me waiting for the rest of the story. The subordinate clause leaves you totally hanging without its partner. It absolutely needs that main clause to survive. Moving on to Section 2, if and time clauses, the no future trap. We are about to uncover one of the most deeply ingrained translation traps for Ukrainian speakers. But first, let's look at the tools. Now, what's really interesting about this is the sheer variety of ways these clauses can begin. It's not just your standard if or when. For if clauses, we're talking about words like provided, unless, or on condition that. For time clauses, you'll see before, after, as soon as, and until. Whenever you hear one of these trigger words, you need to go on high alert. To help you quickly identify these out in the wild, let's assign a core question to each type. If you're dealing with an if clause, the sentence is answering the question, on what condition? If you're dealing with a time clause, the sentence is answering the question, when? Keeping these two simple questions in mind makes it so much easier to instantly categorize the plumbing of the sentence. And here we are, the trap. In Ukrainian, your natural linguistic instinct is to use the future tense because of the word буде. Якщо він буде в місті, він нам зателефонує. It feels completely right to project that future state, doesn't it? But contrast it sharply with the correct English fix, if he is in town. You absolutely must use the present tense here. If he is in town, he will call us. We really have to drop the hammer with this massive, unavoidable rule. Nota bene, no future tenses in if or time clauses. So why is this a thing? It's because the English brain actually processes the condition itself as a present reality, something that must exist before the future action can even happen. The condition is just the current stepping stone to that future result. So no will or would inside that subordinate clause, okay? Let's reinforce this no future rule with a time clause example. Look at the trap here. Як тільки сядеш у таксі, подзвони нам. Once again, a future-leaning action. But the fix proves that our rule applies to when and as soon as, just as strictly as it applies to if. As soon as you get in a taxi, call us. Present tense, get. Simple, elegant, and grammatically flawless. All right, Section 3, relative clauses and punctuation, connecting the details. Let's move to and see how this builds. We are graduating from the basic building blocks to the much more intricate plumbing of English sentences. This is exactly where you add detail, color, and real specificity to your language. A relative clause describes the noun that comes right before it. Think of it like a spotlight pointing directly backward. If I say, this is the lady who works with me, that relative clause, who works with me, points directly backward to the lady. I want to quickly rattle off the tools in our toolkit here.
Picking the correct connecting word is really the very first step to building a solid relative clause. You use where for places, who or whom for people, whose for possession across all nouns, that for all nouns in general, and which exclusively for things or entire clauses. Match the tool to the job. Check out how seamlessly this concept maps from Ukrainian to English when you pick the right tool. Юнак, якого ви бачите, наш новий поліцейський. Because we're talking about a person, a young man, we reach for the connector who. The young man, who you see, is our new policeman. It perfectly glues that descriptive detail right onto the subject. Okay, punctuation time. So the crucial point is how a single tiny comma completely changes the meaning of your sentence. Look at the defining example. The children who skateboard in the street are noisy. Notice, no commas. This means only the specific children who skateboard are the noisy ones. It's essential information. Now, check out the non-defining one. Tom and Mary, who are skateboarding, are noisy. We already know who they are. It's Tom and Mary. The skateboarding part, that's just extra background noise. Because it's non-essential, we just wrap it up in commas. And finally, Section 4, Clauses of Reason, explaining the why. Stepping into this final grammatical room, I can confidently assure you that you already have the structural skills you need to master this. You know how to spot a main clause, and you know how a subordinate clause attaches to it. Now we're just changing the purpose of that attachment. Clauses of reason exist purely to answer one fundamental question: why? They tie the entire logic of the sentence together. If an action goes down in your main clause, your clause of reason shows up right behind it to explain the motivation. And here are the triggers you need to look out for. Briefly, these conjunctions are because, as, since, and for. Sure, they have some slight nuances in how formal they sound, but honestly, they all serve the exact same foundational purpose: attaching a reason subordinate clause directly to your main clause. We can see this final rule in action beautifully with a practical translation. Я купив джинси, бо вони були вдвічі дешевші. In English, I bought jeans because they were half the price. Just look at the perfect structural logic there. Main clause, I bought jeans. Why? Subordinate clause of reason, because they were half the price. The action is perfectly, neatly explained by the reason. So we've covered the foundation of clauses, we dodged the trap of future tenses in condition and time, we locked down relative punctuation, and we unpacked the logic of reason. Now, I want to leave you with a provocative thought, and listen very closely to the structure here. What will you do when you master this grammar? Did you catch that perfect time clause at the end? Present tense master. Keep practicing these structures, identify the main and subordinate parts when you're reading or listening, and watch your English fluency absolutely skyrocket. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy learning.